Hi guys. Today is the Friday before Christmas, December 20th. Everything that I've fixed this week has been picked up for the holidays, and here is my repair lineup. Had this one come in yesterday, an Echo CS3510. The customer's words were, "It runs like crap." That's his words, not mine. There is another Stihl MS290. I just did a video on a 290. You guys have probably seen it already. This saw is here missing some parts. There is a mystery saw in a box. Probably see that over Christmas. MS260 for service. A 420 Dalmar that won't start. An 038 Stihl, hard to start. And an 024 and an 026, both found in a dumpster. A two-man Hornet. A 7910 Dalmar that won't start. A 260 from a dumpster. And a couple 261s that won't start. So just because it's Christmas doesn't mean that I won't be out here fixing chainsaws. So you'll be seeing me over Christmas quite often, I'm sure. So let's start with this 038. Get on my workbench. Oh, hey there. Welcome back to my workbench. My name is Erica, and I'm so glad that you're here today. We have a Stihl 038 on the bench right now. I love working on these older saws, and I have been looking forward to this one. So the customer who dropped this saw off said that it's very, very hard to start. He said he bought the saw brand new, and he said go over it completely with a fine-tooth comb and give it whatever it needs. He wants to get another 30 years out of this saw. So come along with me and let's jump into this 038. Well, it's an exciting day on my workbench. I get to work on a Stihl 038. I don't mind working on the newer saws, but I love working on the older saws. So the customer who dropped this off, he wasn't able to tell me a whole lot about it other than he bought the thing brand new. So I got the serial number off of it, and I gave Stihl a call. And with the serial number, they were able to tell me that this saw was sold brand new on January the 2nd of 1992. They also told me that this saw is a Magnum, an 038 Magnum. Well, that label says Super, so this top cover is likely not original to the saw. So Stihl 038s came in three variations. There was an 038 AV, there was an 038 Super, and there was an 038 Magnum. 61cc, 67cc, and then the 72cc. So this is actually a 72cc 038. He's owned this saw for 32 years. He wants to get another 32 years out of it. He said go over this thing with a fine-tooth comb, give it whatever it needs. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get started. Let's check the fuel in this. We'll make sure there's bar oil in it, and then we'll head outside. There's maybe just a drop of fuel in the bottom down there. That's a metal tank on this saw. So the fuel line and fuel filter look newer, and the fuel filter is not the right one. It's like an MS170 size fuel filter, a little white one. In the bottom of the tank is a little bit of a buildup on the tank. Let's see if I can zoom in and show you. Right down the bottom of the tank, you see that brownish buildup? This thing maybe had fuel sit in it for a while at one time, and then someone's maybe done a bit of a refresh fuel line and filter. Some of these 038s had a really short fuel line, and this one is one of them. So the fuel line is so short that I can't really pull the fuel filter out without risking ripping or breaking that fuel line. I don't want to do that. So let's put some fresh mix in this. Yes, there is bar oil in it. Well, let's take this thing outside and see if it'll start for us. I'll meet you out there. Well, that saw is heavy and no sign of wanting to start. So let's dig a little deeper into this. Let's take this air filter cover off. So these air filters, I'm going to tell you something about them. Here's a new one. When you put this saw down to choke, you see that? So if your air filter was broken, wore out, not working right for some reason, or I have seen somebody put an aftermarket air filter on one of these and it just didn't work properly. Without a working choke, you'll never get this thing started. Probably noticing that these two filters look different. So that is a Stihl mesh winter filter for cold, not dusty conditions. And this would be your flocked filter for dusty summer type conditions. Now, I don't know this for sure, but I have read somewhere that these 038s were designed for warmer climates. So we're in a cold climate here, so maybe that saw has this going against it. I could be wrong about that. These saws were engineered in the 70s. These saws are before my time, but I'm sure there's some people in the comments who know a lot about these 038s. If you know more about the history of them, were they designed for cold weather? If you know anything about them, just let us know in the comments. Something else I'm noticing here is some tape on that coil wire. So first thing, let's examine this air filter, and then we're also going to check for spark. So some of these 038s, the carburetor had a compensator port. This one does not. So this air filter, you see how he's burnt that to seal it up. So this air filter is designed for a carburetor with a compensator port, but he didn't need it. The new air filter that I was just holding here, so there it is, but it's not drilled through. So if you bought this for your saw and you had a compensator port, you would have to drill that hole out. If you bought this and you don't have a compensator port, it's already sealed up for you. So this one must have already been, it was drilled out and he wanted to seal it up. So we just melted it a little bit. Some of you are probably asking, what is a compensator port? So that is a topic for its own video. So a couple things I'm starting to notice here. I've already pointed out that we have tape on the coil. Do you see that sticking through right there? That's not supposed to be there. There's a Phillips in there. You know, I kind of wondered when I seen this with the metal fuel tank. I thought, well, I think those came on the early 038s. But then when I called in and he said this was bought new in 1992, I thought that was kind of odd. But what I'm starting to realize here now is that we have a Frankenstein of a saw. I think this tank is from an old saw, late 70s, early 80s, and this saw is 90s, and this top cover doesn't match. So let's keep peeling back the layers. So the air filter that I took off of it, I think it's working fine. Sometimes these can kind of warp and then they won't seal properly. And then you won't have a proper working choke. But I think it's working fine. So what happens when this air filter is on is when you choke the saw, see that little black nub there? That's pushing up on this. So that's why the condition of this air filter and it being OEM is important. I just put our winter filter back on. That's the one that I took off of it because I want to pay attention to when I put this down to choke, if everything is functioning like it should. It's going to be hard for you to see this, but I'm going to, you see that? It's off and choke. So that appears to be functioning just like it should. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this air filter is not the reason why this saw won't start. So we'll keep using this one. We're going to just clean it up, but we're going to keep digging here and see what else we can find. So I'll take this back off for now. I wanted to show you that air filter thing because I've seen many, many people struggle with these saws, and it was all over that choke mechanism. So if you have an 038 at home, just remember this. Okay, so we have a taped up coil wire here. Let's test for spark. So that's an NGK plug. It's got a screw-on cap on it, and the cap is screwed on backwards. So obviously there's been somebody fiddling around with the saw, trying to get it running better. So let's just put that back on the proper way. And I'll grab my spark tester. Okay, I'm just going to move the saw down to the floor and pull it over. I don't have the upper body strength to pull the saw over at this height. So I'll meet you down at the floor. Okay, I'm going to pull this saw over, and we are looking in this little window here for spark. Okay, so it looks like we don't have a spark issue. Now let's pull that spark plug out and just have a look at it, and we'll have a look down into the piston cylinder. Okay, so the whole spark plug is loose as well. That plug was very loose. BM6A. So that is the incorrect spark plug. Maybe it's okay for this saw, but Stihl would call for an NGK BPMR7A, and the plug was not in tight. Let me grab my camera and we'll take a peek. Well, it looks pretty good in there. You could see that one carbon score, but for a 32-year-old chainsaw, it looks really good. There's nothing in there that is causing this saw to not start. Let's do a compression test. Looks like 150 pounds. I've seen 038s with higher compression. I've seen 038s with lower compression. That's good enough. And the compression isn't the reason why this saw won't start. I'm going to go ahead and put a new spark plug in this. NGK BPMR7A, gapped properly. We'll give my new gapping tool another try. So that plug is gapped perfectly. I like my new tool. I went and cleaned our winter filter that we removed from it. I still can't say for sure that this isn't the problem. Sometimes these can become kind of warped or kind of dished, and this meets the carburetor right there. And if it doesn't make a seal, the choke will not work properly. And I've seen air filter problems with these 038s so many times that we are... So I'm going to put this back on. We're going to go outside and try to start it. If it won't start for us, I'm going to put a new air filter on and try it again. And we'll see what happens. I want to go one thing at a time here so we can try to narrow down what the problem was. I doubt that this new spark plug resolved our issue, but we're going to find out. Maybe it was a spark plug. Well, there, it started for us. It doesn't run well, but it runs. It doesn't like to restart. The chain is spinning all the time. Could be worn out clutch springs. So we either have a fuel system problem, an air leak, or both. I could guess at it and just start throwing parts at it, or I could find out what's wrong with the saw and fix it properly. Let's do that. Just start throwing parts at it? No. Well, first things first, let's pull the barn chain off this and get it out of the way. Oh yeah, the 038 chain tensioner is on the front. Handy place to put it. Well, let's have a look here. You guys see anything wrong here? See that big old washer? That's not the right washer. So that washer, I think it's made its own groove. It's actually fitting right down in with the clip. It's not good. Let's take that apart. Yeah, that's wrong. Look how it's not even, the hole's not even round anymore. It's like oblong. And the rim sprocket is wore out. So this washer and this worn out clip were riding around in the same groove together. I don't see too bad of damage to that crankshaft, but this could end badly. So if you ever lose that washer or need one, just go to your Stihl dealer and get one. Don't do this. And when that clip gets worn so badly that you can actually see the wear marks on it, grab a new clip while you're there, or grab a couple so you have one handy. These aren't expensive parts, but this could be an expensive mistake. I won't dig any deeper into this for now. I just wanted to see if there was damage caused from this. So we're going to pull the air filter off this, the carburetor, the muffler, seal it up, and do a vacuum and pressure test. I know you guys have seen me do this many times. Some of you enjoy this, and some of you find this monotonous. So I don't know. I can't make everybody happy. So I will get the stuff off of it and set it up for a test. And I guess if you don't want to watch this, just skip through. So there's a couple T27s here. And there's one flathead right there. It's a little tricky to get to. And you can see the paint wore off the handle right there from that being taken off. And now that I'm looking closer, the inside of the handle, let's see if I can get you in there. At some point, it looks like that was rubbing on the handle. You see that damage there? I'm going to say this 038 has had a tough and hard life. Just going to stuff a little piece of rag in there, and I'll go clean this area up before we take the carb off. I'll be right back. Okay, let's pull that carb off of there. A couple 8 mils holding it on. Judging by the way this thing was running outside, I think we have an air leak somewhere, but we're going to find out for sure here in a few minutes. Oh, and something else, some of you probably already noticed this. Besides the coil wire having tape on it, that wire there has been, someone's wrapped it. That there, that's not factory. So I don't know what happened here, if something was, if there was rubbing or chafing or chewing or whatever was going on. Anyways, something's been going on here with this saw. Let's get the fuel out of this thing. I'm going to pull the fuel line off the carb, and then we will unhook our throttle linkage. Okay, so that is unhooked. There you go, carburetor off. Tillotson, made in the USA. Put a couple washers on there. I'd put them on there just to protect my tool from getting chewed up. Okay, well that looks good. Spark plug is in and tight. The saw does not have a decompression valve to worry about. So let's pull the muffler off of it. One flathead on top, and there's 2 T27s. There is 2 T27s back in there. See, there's one. They are hard to see without light on them. Everything's black in there. There we are. Muffler off. Well, let me grab my camera. Let's take a look in there from the exhaust side. So there's the muffler gasket that just came off of it. I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be metal, but that's what I just removed. We just keep finding more and more as we go on here. Funny thing is that the owner didn't mention anything about anything that we found. But the saw is 32 years old, so maybe he forgot that someone's been cobbling on it. Well, the piston has a carbon buildup. The exhaust port has a carbon buildup. The intake side of the cylinder has some scoring. That could be from dirt ingestion. If this saw has been running this winter air filter in dusty conditions, that would do it. I don't think it was straight gas because I don't see scoring all the way around. I only see it on the intake side of the cylinder. So let me seal this up and we will get on to our test. All right, we are all sealed up. I'll grab my tool, pressure vac test tool. Bought this from Stihl. First thing we do is make sure that our tool is working fine. Just hold my thumb over it. No problem there. Hooked up to the port on the intake block. And the first thing we're going to do is pull vacuum. I cannot build vacuum at all. Let's move over to pressure. Nothing, but I can hear it. Okay, we got to find where that leak's coming from. It could be one of my connections, or it could be something else. Whatever it is, it's a major one. It's not the spark plug. It's not my intake block. So I can tell you right now that I can hear the sound coming from down in here. Can't see it, but can definitely hear it. I think I can feel it. So down in here is something called an intake boot. I know some of you already know what that is, but some of you probably don't. But it is down here. It's made of rubber. Let's see if I can zoom in here for you. Black. I'm pointing at it right there. That black rubber thing you see at the tip of my flashlight, that is the intake boot. It's made of rubber because this saw does have some movement to it, so that intake boot has to be a bit flexible. Now, it's not uncommon if a saw has worn out AV mounts, and like we seen here, the damage to this handle. At one time, something happened to this saw. Something broke an AV mount or something, and this thing would have been loose and flopping around. That will quite often damage an intake boot. I think that's where the sound's coming from. We're going to spray some soapy water down there and just see if we can detect the leak. I just want to do this in a way that you guys can see as well. I've got the saw sitting on its side here. Just going to zoom in. And I'll shine my light in there. This is a tricky one to see. So soap, there you go. This thing has a massive leak at the intake boot. Massive. Got a cylinder here from out back. This is off Stihl MS250, but this will give you a better idea of what we just looked at. Okay, so there it is in the same orientation. So this intake boot comes up right behind where my intake block is here. Okay, and you can see it's rubber and it's flexible. If a saw has damaged AV mounts, we don't know what happened to this. Maybe it got ran over. Something bad happened to it anyways. And these can get tore, which is what's happened here. How this saw even ran for us outside, I do not know. But there's your impulse line. Okay, so hopefully that just gives you a better idea. There's your exhaust port. So what I think we have here is we have an 038 Magnum with an 038 Super top cover. And I think this tank and handle are off a very, very early 038 AV. So that makes 3 saws. A carburetor that we don't know what it's off of. So maybe there's 3 saws or more involved in this Frankenstein. So the carburetor that I took off of it, I just checked the high and low jets. So with this thing having a torn intake boot, I would kind of expect these to be adjusted way out. A lot of people, their buddy will come over, light a cigarette, and start playing with these. So that high jet is out 1.5 turns, and that low jet is out 1 turn. I did not expect that. That's like basically factory settings, and this thing ran. That is one old tough bird of a saw right there. So you see saws like this, 038s on Marketplace all the time for sale. Do you know how easy it'd be to go to a guy's place? He fires this thing up, you see it running, and he says it probably just needs, the carburetor tweaked, or maybe just throw a fresh plug in it, order a carb off Amazon, and you'll be all set. And you could take this thing home thinking you have a running cutting chainsaw, and you may have a chainsaw that runs, but not for very long. Let's just test the tank vent here quick. The tank vent looks old and crispy on this, and I have seen these old 038s have these not working before. So we are going to pull vacuum, and it shouldn't hold any vacuum if the vent is working properly. And it is holding some vacuum. So this saw has that going against it too. It should not hold there. All right, add that to the list. So the customer who dropped this off said that this thing is hard to start, hard to restart. He would put a squirt of fuel down the intake, and this thing would fire up and run all day long for him. So I think that he thinks this thing is in need of maybe a carb adjustment, maybe just a carb rebuild, maybe a fresh spark plug. I don't think he realizes all the things that we have going on here. To repair this saw, to replace that intake boot, this cylinder has to come off. So when you have the cylinder off, it should be cleaned up. It's not fried. It should be cleaned up. Crank seals. I can't test the crank seals because of this massive boot leak, but the crank seals are 32 years old, so we should replace them at the same time. Clean up the piston and cylinder, replace the piston rings, intake boot, impulse line, tank vent. There's quite a bit of stuff here. Got some things going on that shouldn't be going on. That carburetor should be opened up and looked at. It may need rebuilding. If you're going to do all of this, then you wouldn't want to skip on that. So this is way more than just a carburetor adjustment or a new spark plug. So I'm going to have to see what he wants to do. It's the Christmas holidays here. I'll see if I can get a hold of him. Just give me a minute. Okay, well, I got him on the phone, and he said many, many years ago, a tree fell on this saw, and they had a bunch of other 038s, similar age ones and older ones, and this thing was pieced back together. He said there's probably 4 chainsaws in total here making this saw up. So I explained to him what I found, everything that you guys know, and yeah, he wasn't really expecting this. He thought it was going to be something pretty simple. So he's going to put some thought into this over Christmas and let me know in the new year what he wants to do. But even if he had said fix it, I would have to order the parts to fix this anyways, and I won't have them to the new year. So either way, it wasn't going to get fixed today. So we're going to wait until the new year, see what he wants to do with it. And there could be a part 2 coming up on the 038 that's hard to start. Well, here we are with a 038 spread across my table and a piece of an MS250 that I was using to show you what an intake boot looks like. So this chainsaw, customer said very hard to start, own since new, go over it completely. Well, we did just that. And I wrote down a list here as I was going of all the things that I was finding. So we took it out in the very beginning and we couldn't get it started. And then we went through some simple stuff. We looked down to the piston cylinder. We did a compression test. I found a loose spark plug and the wrong spark plug. We replaced it with a new one back outside, and the saw did fire up for us. It didn't run well, but it ran. So the spark plug, the fuel line and fuel filter look newer. It's the wrong fuel filter. It should have a larger one. We found lots of evidence of AV mount damage, damage handle, some parts and pieces that shouldn't be here. There's some wiring damage. The coil is taped. This one wire has a wrap on it. We found a washer, the wrong washer. We found a worn out clip. We found a worn out rim sprocket. Some scoring on the piston cylinder, some carbon scoring, an intake boot leak. And if we were going to go through all of this, I would recommend replacing the intake boot, cleaning up the piston cylinder, replacing both crank seals, replacing the piston rings, the impulse line, the tank vent, and also going into that carburetor for a close look, probably rebuilding it. And another thing I forgot to mention when I had it outside running is this saw is not oiling either. So add that to the list. The customer is aware of what's happening. He's going to think about it over the holidays and let me know in the new year. So I'll box this thing up, put it off to the side, and we'll wait to hear from him. Tyler has gone to make me a fresh coffee right now, and I'm on to the next chainsaw. I hope you guys have a fantastic Christmas. Thank you so much for watching. I'm just removing my pressure and vac test tools off of this saw. So there's where my intake block was. Let's have a look. So that is the intake boot right here, the inside of it. and it is not installed correctly. Someone's had this saw all apart. Didn't put it back together right. Can you see all that? It's twisted. The second thing that I want to point out is I measured the diameter of the piston, and it is a 50 millimeter piston in there. If this was a Magnum, it would be measuring 52 millimeters. So the serial number does not match the engine. Either there was a screw up from the factory new when this thing was registered, or that engine doesn't match the carcass. I've seen enough here to know that anything is possible. So this intake boot thing, what's happened here is at some point somebody replaced the tank handle assembly with this metal one, and when they did it, they did not install the intake boot correctly. I wonder how long this saw has been operating like this.